Hi Wolves, today we are making a hybrid trap song. It sounds like this.
Goodbye.
In this video, I'm going to be breaking down the song for you, showing you all the different groups and instruments and tracks that are in here. Hopefully you can learn something from this. We're going to start by just playing the song through all the way so you can hear the final product, and then after that I'll break the track down. So here it is.
You know the rules, and so do I. Say goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
You know the rules. Say goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
Alright, we'll start with the effects. The downlift in the intro. Sort of a granulator downlift layered with the impact. Thunder for some of the low end rumble, the low mids, just to give the intro some more feel. And then before the verse drums start, there's a transition effect. Sort of a cymbal crash when the verse starts. A crash right at the start, a transition out of it, and then another high crash afterwards. A lot of effects, mostly just white noise, transitioning in and out of the verse. It's mostly what I use these effects for. It's just transitioning between different parts of the songs. It's most important to have an impact and a downlifter for after the drop. This song is kind of glitchy and kind of dubstep hybrid trap style, so it's good to have a granulator downlift like this. Just something that has some weird texture effect, just to give the song a little bit more personality, to fill out the space a little bit more, even if it's just a weird noise like this. It doesn't even have to be good, it just has to be there. It can be pretty much anything. And that's it for the effects. I have the effects group going through reverb and then TDR Nova to duck the vocals.
You know the rules, and so do I.
TDR Nova is free. I recommend getting it. I was thinking about getting sort of a paid plugin, maybe Soothe or something similar, but I found TDR Nova
You know the
is enough. It's pretty good. I have it sidechained to the vocals, so that anytime the vocals play, the effects bus is ducking
You know
at 200
the rules,
hertz,
and so do I.
just to make room for the vocals. I could have gone through and manually made something to duck them, either with sidechaining or using an envelope follower, but TDR Nova is just faster. It's so much faster to set it up, and sometimes setting these things up can be really time consuming, and then you have to tweak them, and it can eat up a lot of time. TDR Nova is just, it's a great way to speed it up. I recommend getting it. It is free. For the verses, the intro, we have a vocal, just a vocal shot. There's really nothing special with it. Going through reverb. And then this vocal, it has this flutter here. This is an Ableton effect rack group that I made so that you can get this flutter sounding effect. It basically just goes through an LFO, which is mapped to the low pass cutoff. Then there's an auto pan, and then it has macros to turn up the depth and the rate. So in the intro, it doesn't have that flutter because the depth is turned all the way down. And when we turn it up, we hear it more. Piano in the intro. Using the envelope MIDI, which I use on pretty much everything I have that's MIDI and some audio. This is so that I can use the piano, add effects, and then I can add my own filter movement. So I'm cutting out some of the highs and some of the sides with every note that's played. And you'll see that on pretty much everything. Yeah. Here's a brass loop. This is audio, but you'll see we do have the envelope MIDI on this trigger, which is controlling the filter of the brass. Even though the brass is audio, we can still use the envelope MIDI to control the filter. At the very start of the brass, there's a gate, and it's only taking out 10 decibels when the gate is fully closed. And it just cleans it up a little bit. Running the brass through saturator on soft sine, that really brings out the brassiness. There's no better way to describe it. It just makes it sound more brassy. Here's without, and then with. The verse bass starts with a reverse going into it. I use hyperdimension, the serum effect, on my basses to give it the width. I think a wide bass sounds really good. I know a lot of people make it mono. I think it sounds so good when it's wide, and I really like hyperdimension, especially the dimension, to make it wider. Again, we're using the envelope MIDI from the trigger to control the low pass and cut out the highs, cut out some of the sides also. It goes through a soft clipper and then a limiter. There's another vocal loop in here. Sort of just filling space. It's mostly used just to add some space to the highs, and that plays in between the other vocal. On the verse, I'm using the echo verb washout that I made, so that as I turn this up, you can hear it wash out more, but it's using echo to wash out instead of just reverb. Yeah, the highs get cut out also, so you can't really hear it there. And then the effects and the verse leads go into the same bus. On that bus I have ozone just to control a little bit of shaping, a little bit of saturation, and then a little bit of stereo imaging, mostly just to make it a little bit more thin. I use Ozone's imager because I like the stereo eyes on it, and I like how I can set the milliseconds to be exactly the length of like 1/16th note or something like that. On this song, for the sidechain, for the verse, which is the effects and the leads, I was using multi-band compressor so that I can set different sidechain levels for the lows compared to the highs. I wouldn't do this again. I was doing it for a while. I think that it's not as good as just using a regular compressor for sidechain, because sometimes when you change the volume of it really fast, you're wave shaping it, and that can cause distortion and can actually make it louder as it's being sidechained. And you just don't really have that problem with generic compressors. So using the multiband is good, but I would recommend just using a normal one, and then you can set the input monitor just to be the specific frequencies, and you can kind of control the compression based on that. The drums in the verse sound like this. It's really not much to it. I just added this kick so that the verse has something to be sidechained to give it a little bit of pumping. And then there's some Foleys in here, some drum fills leading into it. Another cymbal crash transition. And the drum fill on the way out. That's just for the verse. The verse is mostly just that kick. And then the build. Transitioning into the build, there's sort of this pulse riser. It starts out fast, and then it slows down. And then here at this point in the song, we're cutting out the verse drums, cutting out most of the verse leads and the effects, and then there's this bass sliding down, sort of a little bit of a glitch sound.
You know the
So at this point in the song, it's a pretty huge shift in the tone of the song. That's why it's really good to have these transition effects to let the listener know that the song is about to change. And then this bass note sweeping down, it's a good way to tell the listener that it's slowing down as the bass is going down.
You know the rules, and so do I.
So the bass goes down and then goes back up. And then the actual build starts. We have a kick, snare loop, that granulator downlift, playing with another bass sliding down, risers, one riser that's kind of a saw wave as we're bringing in more highs. This one is tonal. It's probably playing the root note. It's probably F. Another riser. It's just an octave up, it sounds like. At the end, I'm using this on-switch riser from Virtual Riot. This one is really good because it just cuts through the mix so well. I mean, yeah, it's at -17. You can still hear it pretty clearly because it's so high-pitched. It's really good to put at the very end of your risers. The riser group has saturator, reverb. We are using an EQ to duck the lead, then a glue compressor for the riser group. The actual build group is a drum bus, a shifter that is turning up the fine tuning. So it's kind of making the entire build get pitched up as it continues. It gets higher pitched. TDR Nova again, ducking the vocals. That is it for the build drums. Drop drums sound like this. The fill before the drop is toms. Cymbal crash and then a reverse cymbal crash. The snare that I put reverb on and bounced, and put more reverb on it just to layer with the tom. And then this cashmere drum fill. It's basically a snare. It's one of the huge snares, it sounds like. This is one of my favorite things to put before a drop.
Goodbye.
That snare is just huge. It sounds really good. Sounds like just a ride to play at the very start of the drop. That's just the fills. And then as the drop actually starts, start with the two rides, sweep up into the first snare. There's no kick on the downbeat because we're using these brass stabs. And we could have put a kick there, but there's enough low end in these stabs that we don't really need it. We don't want to put a kick there and sidechain it because we want to hear these stabs at the very beginning. And then the drum loop continues normally. And there's really no percussion on this. It's really just this ride. It's kind of layered with the kicks. It is going down in pitch. This one is up 3 semitones. The second one's at 0. And then it's just a really short drum fill. That snare again. Yeah, there's no other percussions on this. There's not really space in the song to put percussion. You probably could have found a way, but it doesn't really need it. That's the drum group. So then all of the drums go into the same group. The verse, the build, the drop drums all go into the same group, and that group has Ozone on it. Ozone uses a lot of processing power. I didn't want to have 3 of them. That's really the main reason I'm routing all of the drums into the same group. I don't think it's ideal, but I don't want to have 3 Ozones just for the drums. On that Ozone, we're just doing a little bit of EQing, saturation, imager. The imager, I'm just making the lowers a little bit more thin and the high end a little bit wider. It probably doesn't really even need it, but I really like the ozone stereoizer. It sounds really good. And there's a spectral shaper on it because it's finding really high frequency resonances that I'm not good at picking up on, and I really rely on ozone to find them for me, even though a lot of the times you don't actually want to be cutting these frequencies. Like right now it's really just cutting the snare, and the snare probably doesn't need to be cut. I could have gone into the snare and made the 2 decibel cut at 4,000, 5,000, whatever, but I didn't want to. And so we're using ozone for that, even if maybe on paper I shouldn't even cut that at all, but whatever. Yep. Then at the end, it just goes through a limiter. I wouldn't even use a limiter here. Maybe I would put it at 0 instead of -4 where it is now. But whatever. Drop sounds like this during the build.
Goodbye.
We'll start with the bass. The bass has 2 layers. One that is a sub bass. I made this with Serum, then flattened it. We're using a trigger with envelope MIDI so that we can cut the highs out of it. Cutting out 130 because that's where this specific bass was sounding really boxy. We're letting some of the sides through at 100. Huge cut at 595 to duck the leads and the sustain bass. Then we are clipping and then limiting. The sustain bass is the same bass patch that I made in Serum, but then it's just for the highs. In here then we're splitting the mids and the highs, and we are vocoding the highs from the sub bass. Huh. Okay. Interesting. Alright, I don't remember doing that, but alright. Then there's the lows, which are just from the Serum patch. So together they sound like this, just the highs, just the lows. And then hyperdimension to make it wider, adding noise at 10,000. We are side chaining to the lead, putting reverb on it. We have a follow group, which is ducking where the lead is. And the way this works is on the lead, we have an envelope follower that we then mapped to this macro, which is lowering the gain of the EQ so that as the lead is louder, we're ducking these frequencies. And I could have used TDR Nova for that, but I like, in this scenario, I want to be able to see, and I want to be able to change it a little bit more easy. Only letting the very top end of the sides through. It's being panned left and right. And then ducking a lot of the sides, and then ducking more of the lead. And then some final EQs. Some parts of the song, we do let some of the lows through because at that point, we're not playing the sub bass, so we can let the lows of the sustain bass through. Some of the notes, we're using the envelope of the audio to change the pitch by changing the semitones. At the very end of this section, you can hear the sustain gets pitched down. Yeah. The There's also some glitches in here. I think I ran this entire bass group through the phaser and flanger glitch devices I made, and got some glitches that play in here. Yeah. For the vocal group,
Goodbye.
we have Alexa saying goodbye right before the drop. For the verse,
You know the rules.
we're using a lot of multiband compression to make it a lot louder. And then this echo follower I made, it's with an envelope follower and then an echo, so that you only hear the echo when the vocal isn't playing. So as it's quiet, there's more echo. As the vocal's playing and it's louder, there's less echo. So you'll hear that here. You can hear the vocal echo turn up. And then after that, we have another echo that turns on so that you can kind of hear him say goodbye for the build. For the second build, I recorded that and I put it in a granulator. And bounced that and then pitched it up. Yeah. All right, for the drop leads, it starts with this group, which is made up of a brass, super high, the mid brass, super loud, and then it sounds like just a kick to fill out the very, very lows. So it's mostly this sound, a brass stab, ran through a saturator, multiband compression to bring it up, cut out some of the sides, boost around 100 where the fundamental is, run it through the group, which we're automating the reverb to turn up. We have some glue compression for those 3 stabs. We have some reverses to lead into it. And then we are using the time module in Shaperbox to reverse it. And then after the reverse is done, we're using the volume module to mute it. Yeah. For the main leads, we have this group of metal. This one, how did I make this? This one I know I ran through a granulator. I'm pretty sure it was just a snare that I ran through a granulator, and then I froze that and bounced it and ran it through another granulator. And then I believe this is a chime percussion that I froze with reverb and stretched it out to give it the high end. And that just plays after the metal. So the metal doesn't play exactly on the downbeat. It's exactly 50 milliseconds after the downbeat. And that is so that we can not play the lead or that metal at the same time as the kick. So you can see, here's the kick, here's when you actually have the metal. So if we listen to the kick and the metal. When there's a kick, we are playing this thing just right before the metal. It's kind of layered with the kick. But when there isn't a kick, we don't need it. Yeah, that's kind of all there is to it. The trick is making this metal. I think I froze this and bounced it a couple times, and this was originally 3 different things, like 3 different snares that you just run through distortion, and then you flatten it and you shape it, and then run it through a granulator. This is really like 3 different layers of snares at once. And then you just got the chime layer, and then the reverse right before it. At the second half of the drop, it's twice as fast. And then we are using shifter at the end of the drop to pitch it down. We're just modulating the fine. Put shifter on frequency mode, map the fine tuning to a macro, and just automate that macro to turn down. And both of those play during the build. In the build, we're just EQing out the highs and the lows at the very beginning, and then bringing it in more. So kind of the fundamental is right around 750. And then we're ducking a lot of different things at 750 also. I believe somewhere in here, some of the drums in the build are ducking it. And then in the drop, like the basses are ducking that fundamental for these leads, so that I can really cut through. This is one of those leads that, because there's really not a whole lot of information below like 700, you really just have to turn it up a lot, so it's pretty loud. And then you gotta duck everything else around it too to be able to hear it. This one, you just gotta make it super loud. It's one of those things that after you produce for a while, you just know like which things are gonna need to be like much louder than you would think, just for them to be able to sound at a normal volume. The last part of the drop is these vocals, MC Ride Scream compilation. This part I spent so many hours on. I went through probably 8 different types of vocals and just ways of getting it to sound like there's just a scream for the entire drop, but it needs to be just really intense. This is what it sounds like during the build. And then during the drop. Yeah, this actually took forever to get it right. There's a couple of different variations. The first, second, and then the third is being pitched down. One important thing in here is that in the very beginning, it sounds like almost a different vocal just to lead into it. Yeah, it looks easy, but this seriously took so long. I did a bunch of different things to get it to sound the way it does. I first ran it through a granulator to get some variation between the way it sounds in the first and second half of the drop. There's different parts that are pitching it up, some parts that are pitching it down, modulating the coarse and the fine. The panning is the opposite of the sustain bass. I'm using this group that I made, which is just a utility going left and right, and then we can use the phase of the LFO to switch between starting on the left and starting on the right. That's what I use for panning things, like how the sustain, bass, and the vocals are panned opposite directions. One starts left, one starts right, and then they swap left and right over the course of 1 or 2 bars. And then just to keep track of that in the name, I say RL or LR to tell me if it's starting on the left or starting on the right. With a reverb and some EQ to wash it out, we're using this follow group to duck the lead. And then a limiter at the end. There's a glass shattering sample. Reversed and reversed again. Yep. And then the leads, the samples, the vocals, the bass all go into this drop group. On the drop group, we're using the Echo Verb Wash to wash it out with echo. I really like the way the echo sounds to wash it out. I like it a lot more than reverb. Yeah, we have reverb on this also, but yeah. Everything in the drop goes through an ozone, which is just doing a little bit of EQ shaping, saturation, imager to make it wider, and then a spectral shaper just to kind of tame more of the high frequencies. It's really not doing much. It's just every once in a while, ozone thinks that there's something at like 15,000 that should be cut. Maybe it's right, maybe it's not, but I'm letting it cut it anyways. Then a glue compressor, standard limiter at 0, the multi-band sidechain that I talked about, probably wouldn't use it again, and this is why. So we have the limiter set to 0, so you don't see it go past 0, but then you look here and you see, oh, it's at positive 0.03. The reason it's at above 0, even though the limiter is at 0, is because after the limiter, we're doing this multi-band sidechain. And I have a theory that it's something to do with the crossover points between the bands that's causing wave shaping because of the rapid change in volume, which is basically wave shaping it, causing distortion, making it be louder. But that doesn't really matter. All that matters is that I probably wouldn't do this again. I would use regular compressors for the sidechain just to avoid this getting louder after the limiter. It's not supposed to go above 0. Not that because it's bad, but because I have the limiter set here at 0 because I don't want it to go above 0. And I could have put a limiter after this too, after all of this sidechain, but I just don't want to. I'm just going to use a regular compressor for sidechain going forward. So that's all the different groups here on the main channel. I am running it through Saturator and then multiband dynamics, just a little bit of compression. It looks like we're taking less than 2 decibels off at any point in time. I usually wouldn't use a saturator on the main channel, but this is one of those songs where it just can't be loud enough. So I am using a saturator here and multiband compression, ozone, just to do stabilizing, a little bit more EQ shaping. Taking off like 1 decibel of the highs, adding a 0.5 decibel in some other places. I'm using this thing I made called not drop, which just means that when it's not the drop, we are taking off 2 decibels, 30% of the width, cutting a little bit of the lows, a little bit of the highs. And then during the drop, that turns off, and that just means everything gets around 2 decibels louder.
Goodbye.
Yeah. And then at the very end, there's a limiter, but we're not hitting the limiter. It's just there so I can kind of monitor the output level without having to switch to this other view, the mixing view. And that's everything on it. That's the entire song. So let me know if there's anything I missed, if there's anything you have questions about, if there's anything else I should do in these videos. Let me know in the comments. For now, I'm just going to play the second drop again, and then I'll end the video.